Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review covers a 3D printed 69 Charger Pro Mod body shell. It's a 125 scale unit from TDR Innovations, number 6040520. Now, for a few years, there's been a lot of talk and hope regarding the application of 3D printing technology on the scale modeling hobby. So I decided to get one of the latest offerings to see how it's progressing. After reading an article about some of the new 3D printing companies, I looked up TDR Innovations and ordered a 69 Dodge Charger Daytona body shell to see what could be done to produce a respectable model from a sample. Hold on, folks. Looks like my program director, Newt, has a question.
Doug, it really looks cool, but why are the windows black?
That's a great question, Newt. The style of this model is called a slammer. It's meant simply to show off the exterior without any other distracting details. Now, folks, I was mostly interested in surface finish, so that's the gist of this review, but there are a significant number of other questions to be considered. There's issues like applicable adhesives, availability of parts other than the body, methods of modification. These are all things that will have to be resolved at some point if 3D printing is going to be viable as a source for the hobbyist.
So why don't they just print the whole kit?
Oh, that's another good question. Sadly, I think at this point, it would add significantly to the cost and considerable complexity for the programming needed for the printer. Now, I don't think the industry is ready for that yet. When you're done with this model, it'll be 8 1/4 inches long, 2 3/4 inches wide, 2 1/2 inches high, and the wheelbase is about 5.6 inches. Now, to be sure, there's quite a few companies out there that are starting up and trying to print 3D parts, most of them smaller parts, but TDR Innovation is in my mind, doing a good job of offering both full-size body parts and smaller parts. As you see here in their page initially, if you look it up on Google, it'll bring a Google site, and this is what you'll see. Now, they offer both, but for these purposes, we're just going to talk about the body shell. And here's the body shell complete as it was shipped in. It comes in a nice plastic bag. It's well packaged, and you can go to their site and then select what kind of model that you're looking for, and there's a lot of choices all the way up to 1/8 scale, well, for most of the bodies. But here I selected the 1969 Pro Mod Daytona in the Dodge menu, and I went down to the 1/25 scale size, and then finally I decided on the one with vented doors and no scoop. So if you click on the link there, it says purchase in Shapeways, and it will take you to the Shapeways site where you'll get to see that particular item and the price. Now, just below the price, you also have an option to choose your material. Now, this particular product comes in two materials. One is called a versatile plastic, white natural versatile plastic material, and that's really the only realistic choice for the modeler these days because of the cost. But they also offer a smooth fine material. Not sure what that is, but it's 6 times the price. And then after I ordered, I waited for delivery. So the item got here in about 2 weeks, which I thought was pretty quickly, since you know that these are not made until after you order them. And it was well packaged. You can see the box here is much larger than the body, and there's a lot of nice packing material in there to keep it from getting damaged. However, I think you'd have to land a UPS truck on this thing to hurt it. Anyway, the body comes sealed in a plastic bag also, and curiously, the wings appear to be on the bottom. I don't know if they're added afterwards or if they're molded first, but you can see here that they're underneath, and they're just attached by a couple of small sprue attachment points. Now you can't see it in this photo because the item is just snow white, but on first inspection, I won't say that I was shocked by the roughness and depth of the printed ridges on the body surface, because I had seen 3D printed engine and other parts before, but looking at it seemed like a daunting task to turn this into a presentable car body. Now, in this photo, the body's primed so that you can see the heavy ridges there on the scoop and the hood and the back end, even the side part of the door, the top part of the door sills there. And it's been primed, as I mentioned, and there's significant ridges that are even on the flat parts because it has to wait to do another pass. I gave it another light coat of a lighter gray primer, and I started sanding on the roof to see, what I was in for. Initially, I thought that I could just sand these ridges out, but this stuff is as tough as nails. So I emailed TDR Innovations, and Tim Floyd responded, and I asked him if there's a particular donor kit for the body shells, and he said they don't really market them that way. They're most exclusively used for slot cars, and that they really love them because they are light and very tough. And he said that generally they fit a custom built or adjustable chassis to the frame. Now it seemed pretty obvious they're not marketing these bodies to the replica market, and he was right on when he said light and tough. Now a word about the word tough. This stuff is like reinforced fiberglass. It's like ABS on steroids. Now, that can be good or bad depending on what you're doing, but you have to keep the material's properties in mind when you're working with the body. First, I pulled out some 400 grit paper, and I started to sand the top, as I mentioned, and I realized it'd take about 100 years to get them done at this rate, so I downshifted to the point where I was using 100 grit dry paper. I continued to grind away for about an hour on this thing, and then I followed it up with about a half an hour of 320 grit for a smooth surface on the tops of the ridges. So here's my secret. To fill in those valleys between the ridges, I knew I'd need something pretty thick. So I turned to my old standby, the 3M glazing putty. It's an automotive product, but when thinned appropriately with some acetone, it works pretty well for these applications. Now there might be other methods or products that work, but I knew how to use this one, and it's pretty cheap in comparison. After thinning a pot full of the stuff, I smeared it over the entire body. I painted the entire body with some putty and also the rear wing using a wide brush, moving quickly to minimize clumping. I let it dry for a couple days naturally. Just air drying seems to work best and doesn't cause too much shrinkage and therefore cracking. So after that was dry, I wet sanded the high spots with some 320 grit paper. And then the hardness of the material works in your favor here, because you can't get past the body material with 320 grit paper for a really long time. It's very hard. So sanding the surface right down to the body leaves the putty in the valleys, as you can see in this photo. Once I got my first sanding done, there was a couple of low spots, so I added some more putty to those. A wise man once told me, never sand out the low spots, just fill them in and do it again. So I touched that up and added some more finish sanding to finish it up. This thick putty fills everything. Fortunately, there's not a lot of detail on this body other than it to be concerned about. But you do have to keep the panel lines clear and rescribe them throughout the process with a scribing tool or the backside of a hobby knife blade. And there's also another area of concern. The panel lines are pretty jagged, and if you were actually going to use this for a competition level, you would want to fill these in with something like a CA glue or CA glue and dust and rescribe them for a clean panel line. And now that I had something pretty close to work with, here's secret number 2. I sprayed the body with some Duplicolor filler primer. Now, after each of 4 coats had dried, I wet sanded them with successively finer grits from 240 to 600. Now that we've got a sufficiently smooth body surface, and you'll have to determine this when you get done, it might take more than 4 coats, and that's up to you. But it was time to start doing conventional modeling. So I sprayed the entire model with Krylon's Gloss Jungle Green. That's a 2712 paint, and I thought it looked very much like some of the earlier 69 and 70 Daytonas. So once that was done, I let that dry completely before I went on. The body itself has a couple of cross braces for stiffness so that it doesn't get twisted or crushed in shipping, I think, and perhaps something for manufacturing stability. But as you can see here, I cut those off, and then I grind the stubs off there against the body so that they were flush. Okay, I know I told you that I was just going to work on the body surface finish here, but I just felt that it needed a couple of wheels under it to make it look more like a real model, which it really does. So I borrowed these from the 58 Christine Plymouth set Pro Mod kit and added a couple of label marquees on the outside from Goodyear there, and then I mocked up a temporary frame. Yep, that's just a couple of axles on a piece of styrene, and it worked out pretty well because, well, after all, this is a slammer. All you're going to see are the wheels and the body. There's nothing underneath to see or inside. Fortunately, the body shell is made such that you can install the windows from the outside, and there's some real nice insets there to put them into and glue them into position. Now, I'm going to paint these windows black, so I used some of the cellulose sheet that I had and a fine point Sharpie, and I traced it out from the inside. I just put it against the window and then traced it out from the inside, and then I cut out the window and installed it into the backlight there, but we're going to set that all aside for later. I traced out all of the windows, including the windshield, and remember, you have to cut those a little bit larger than you're tracing, because that's what fits into the inset and allows you to glue it to the ridge there from the outside of the body. I then used some painter's tape and covered up one side of the window glass because then we're going to paint that black so that we've got a slammer look. Next, I mixed up some acrylic craft paint. This is black, and you just use simply about 1/2 of paint and about a quarter of liquid soap, and then a quarter of water, warm water. Mix it up, and we'll use that to fill in the panel lines and the insets where the windows go on the part. I placed the backlight window into position just so that I could see how we were looking against the panel lines with the dark. Now, once the paint has dried on your model after you've painted it with the panel line solution there, you simply rub off the excess. You can use a fingernail too to kind of just scrape off or along the ridge of your panel lines, and then use a damp cloth to clean it up so that it looks nice and crisp. I used some of the white Tamiya masking tape here that's made for curves, and I simply used some flat black paint to paint that lower trim on the bottom of the window area on both sides. Now here we're going to address another issue with these body shells. They don't come with decals either. So you can source parts. I got this out of one of the 69 Charger kits. This is an AMT kit, and I also made a couple because I wanted this to have a special flare. And as you'll see here, I used some one-way descriptions and Dodge monikers to place on the body. So the tail stripe goes around here, and this all works out very well, especially with a little setting solution to get it to fit into those panel line curves or issues. And up front there, I put a white piece of just plain decal paper. to show off the script there on the front end. So you can see here the back end, this was part of the decal that I borrowed, and then in the front we used that white to show off the one-way emblem in the front. In the back end, the taillight surround was also painted with the craft paint, but the rest of the taillight area there, including a little strip in the center, was chromed. So I added some foil, some bare metal foil to that area to give the appearance of chrome around that trim. So then of course I added some taillight red to the edges to give the taillight impression, and of course added the strip legal ROR plate just because. Well, there you have it. I glued all the windows into place, finished up the decals, and a couple of coats of clear coat, and my model body was done. Also, I put the rear wing into position and set it on top of my mock frame. Now, you're probably asking, with all that effort, why would I even look at buying one of these 3D printed bodies when there's easier alternatives? Well, I look at it as supporting your local hobby shop. Now, this is a new industry, and if it can't see a market for these products, they simply won't put the effort into development. And I'm pretty sure that Tamiya or Revell of Germany aren't going to be offering any unkitted 40 Boeings or 47 Tucker Model 48s anytime soon. Now, using 3D scanning technology, they might be able to offer some of those iconic models whose molds have disappeared over time. So, maybe one of these days, a startup will come out and offer one up for people like us who might want one. Well, we hope you like this 3D printed body review. And so that you don't miss any more reviews, click on our subscription icon in the lower right hand of any of our reviews. You can find us on Facebook and at our website, rightonreplicas.com. Thanks.